as you know from your work in the Senate Intelligence Committee, debt, personal debt, is a very significant issue when considering security clearances. What is your reaction to that debt that the president has?
Well, I mean, Lawrence, this is why the American people deserve to have a full accounting of the financial interest, including the indebtedness of the President of the United States. And I do share in that concern. Who does he owe the money to? Tell us, who do you owe the money to? And do you owe debt to any foreign nation? Do you owe, do you owe debt? Do you owe money? Let's just be clear about what debt means. You owe somebody money. Do you owe anybody money who is impacted by any decision you make as President of the United States? We need to know that. The American people have a right to know that when the President of the United States acts, he acts with their priorities in mind, not with his priorities in mind. And we've already known that he puts his political priorities in front of the American people. But we are now seeing, in a way that is evident, clearly evident, that he also is prepared to put his personal interest ahead of the American people by not disclosing who he owes money to. And apparently he owes a lot of money, maybe to a lot of people, and we should know.
So Michael Steele, the full interview will run at 10 o'clock, of course, on The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. But she makes the same points that were made much more sharply by Peter Strzok and Frank Figliuzzi, two former deputy FBI directors in the counterintelligence arena, who say that if there isn't already, there should absolutely be a counterintelligence investigation to answer the question Kamala Harris just laid out. To whom does he owe money? And whomever that is, what leverage are they exerting over him? And if you look at his puzzling foreign policy interactions, from toting the MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia's line on the slaughter and dismembering of Jamal Khashoggi, a journalist living and working in Virginia. You look at the incessant defense of Russia. You look at the policies when it came to Turkey, who we know from these returns gave him $1 million, that repelled his own Secretary of Defense, his own National Security Advisor. It certainly seems that just from where you and I sit, Michael Steele, there are plenty of little crumbs that would seem worthy of investigation.
Oh, absolutely. I've said for a number of years now that the sweet ticklish spot in this Trump orbit is the foreign entanglements. Kamala has it exactly right in terms of the inquiry there. Because the reality of it is, his son has already told us, how do you think we built our golf courses? The Russians gave us some money.
Right.
You know? So, I mean, right. That's Don Jr. telling us that. That wasn't an investigation. He just volunteered that, you know? So, yeah, I think there is reason now, in light of this reporting, and more reporting, as I understand from reading that Times article to come, that there is incumbent upon the Congress to raise the stakes here, because our national security is at risk. The interests of the United States are in play. And if there is a financial interest that the president deems greater, a personal financial interest he deems greater than our interests as a nation and our interests as citizens, yeah, I think I'd want to know about that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.